Third lecture is about the basic terminology that is used for the biodiversity. These are the terms basically used by different experts who are working in the field of biodiversity, ecology, conservation, environmentalists, and the plant scientists or the botanists. So first definition we commonly use in this lecture is biodiversity. What is biodiversity? Biodiversity basically consists of two words, that is life, living. Diversity means variety. Variety of living things, diversity of the life, diversity of the organisms is called as biodiversity. It's called as biodiversity. And this diversity basically includes plants, animals, microbes, genes, DNAs, insects, birds, fishes, and every living organism. Okay? On our planet, every life is called as bio, and their variety or diversity is called as biodiversity. But nowadays, the word biodiversity is changed. Another terms that is called as biogeography. New word that is used for the biodiversity is a biogeography. Biogeography. Bio is life, geo mean earth, and graphy mean distribution. Graphy mean distribution. So the diversity of the living thing and diversity of the ecosystem and diversity of the habitat and diversity of the locations, altitude, latitude, water bodies, terrestrial land, marine land, mountains, plain, deserts. This is called as the distribution pattern of the living thing. Distribution areas where the organisms live, that is called as biogeography. Biogeography means the diversity of the life that exists in different localities, that exists in different distribution sites, that is called as biogeography. So the new term that is used for the biodiversity is biogeography. And here you see that geography means habitat. Geography means habitat. What is habitat? What is biological habitat? Biological habitat is basically the ecological address of the organisms. Ecological address of the organism where the living things exist with diversity of the biotic and abiotic components. Where the living things exist, there are other living organisms like producer, consumers, decomposer, and the abiotic component that includes the water, temperature, soil, habitat, moisture, are the abiotic components. So this is a combination of basically biotic and abiotic components. So this is the biological or ecological address or locality or place or site where the organism live. That is called as habitat. This is called as habitat. And habitat, another term that we use in biodiversity is habit. Habit is basically the levels or ranks of the organisms. That is called as habit. Habit means life form. And life form means different life forms exist for plants, different life form exist for the animals, birds, insects, microbes. So this is a life form. Either they are shrubs, either they are trees, either they are herbs, either they are small insects, either they are arthropods, coral reefs, birds, fishes. So these are different types of the life form that is called as habit. So habit and habitat, there is a much difference. This is life form, this is the ecological address of the organism. Another term we commonly use is in biodiversity is called as ecological niche. Ecological niche basically is that the function of the living organism. Every organism play an important role in every ecosystem, in every habitat. Some living organisms, they perform the function of photosynthesis. Some organisms, they perform the function of decomposition. They decompose the dead bodies and then make the humus and humic acid and move toward the minerals, and minerals we used as a micro and macronutrient. So the function, ecological or biological function in an ecosystem is called as ecological niche. Every organism perform a specific function. This is called as ecological niche. So these are the few terms that are related to the biodiversity, biogeography, habitat, habit, and then ecological niche. Another important term we commonly use in this course is called as biomes. Biomes. Biomes means regional ecosystem, different geographical ecosystems, that they are called as biomes. For example, you learn about the deserts biome, moist temperate biomes, plain biomes, mountainous biomes, tropical rainforest biomes. So these are the basically different regional ecosystem where the biodiversity exists, where the biodiversity found. That is called as biomes. Biomes are actually the regional ecosystems. For example, Himalayan biomes, Poindugash biomes, Karakoram biomes, desert biomes, prairie, pampas. So there are a number of the biomes that are found in the earth planet, that are found in the biogeography. That is, they are called as biomes. Clear? And three other terms we commonly use in every lectures, that is species diversity, ecosystem diversity, and genetic diversity. You are, I think, familiar about the species diversity. The diversity of the different species in an ecosystem are in biogeographic biomes, and genes and genetic makeup and the DNAs that they exist in all the living organisms. All the living organisms basically, they are composed of the genes and genetic makeup. That is called a genetic diversity. Ecosystem, you know that where the both biotic and abiotic component join together and they form an ecosystem. For example, deserted ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, marine ecosystem, freshwater ecosystem. So you know about these terminologies. Two other important terms we use in this lecture is called as in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. Okay. In situ conservation is basically the conservation of the living organisms, conservation of the different biological diversity in their original habitat, in their original community, in their original ecosystem, in their original place or site. That is called as in situ conservation. Yani protection of the living things, protection of the living biota, protection of the biodiversity in their original habitat is called as in situ conservation. For example, we use the word Yale National Park, we use the word Ayubia National Park, we use the word that is the Bamindi National Park. Bamindi National Park is the region where the biodiversity of the national park is protected, and there is a ban on hunting, fishing, cutting of the forest. So these communities and the government, they make a plan to protect those species in their original habitat. That is called as in situ conservation, and protection at their site, protection at their site. While ex situ conservation is basically the protection of the biodiversity, protection of the variety of the organism from their natural habitat to your controlled habitat. Means in your botanical garden, in your farmland, in your fish farm, in your museum, in your zoo, museum, botanical gardens, or the farmland. These are those sites which are under your control, where you have a control for the protection of these species. Might be cryo-preservation labs where you have to preserve the species at -4 degrees centigrade. For example, gene banks, seed banks, all these different terms that we use for ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation is the protection or conservation of the species, of the ecosystem, of the genes or genetic in your control condition outside their natural habitat. Outside their natural habitat protection is known as ex situ conservation. You clear about this ex situ? So these are the common terms we use during our lectures about the conservation. And you learn about the conservation. What is conservation? Conservation is basically protection, preservation of the organism is known as conservation. This is called as protection. Or protection consists of two types of protection. That is called as conservation and preservation. We use two terms, that is conservation and preservation. Preservation is, we commonly use the word for botanical garden, we use the word for herbaria, we use the word for museum, we use the word for farmland, we use the word for your controlled habitat where you have to preserve the species, preserve the specimens. So this is called as preservation. By conservation, we commonly use the conservation word is generally for the protection of the organisms or the biodiversity in their natural habitat, national park, wildlife sanctuaries, rangeland, desert ecosystem, tropical rain ecosystem, moist temperate ecosystem. So the conservation is basically for using, commonly using for the in situ conservation, or the preservation is commonly using for the word ex situ conservation. Some people say that in situ, some people say that ex situ, it's up to you where you pronounce either in situ or ex situ conservation. Clear this? Sometimes we use the word cryo-preservation. Cryo-preservation. Anybody know about the cryopreservation? What is cryopreservation? What is the exact definition of cryopreservation or a technical? Anybody? Cryopreservation. What is
preservation of biodiversity and they reproduce by cold treatment.
कोल्ड ट्रीटमेंट और उसके लिए स्पेसिफिक जो वर्ड हम यूज करते हैं दैट इज -4 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड, दैट इज कॉमनली उससे माइनस से नीचे ही होता है, ठीक है। -4 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड इज द बेसिक रिक्वायरमेंट फॉर क्रायो प्रिजर्वेशन, वेयर यू प्रिजर्व द जीन, वेयर यू प्रिजर्व द टिश्यूज, वेयर यू प्रिजर्व द सीड्स at low temperature, cold treatment temperature, and then you have to multiply into a botanical garden, in museum, in zoo, in farms, and so many things. So this is called basically cryopreservation. Cryopreservation is also a form of protection. So this is a common term we will use during our lecture for the when we talk about the conservation. Another term we commonly use in this lecture is CBD. What stands for the CBD? A Convention on Biological Diversity. So this is basically the Convention on Biological Diversity. When biodiversity is facing a number of the threats, well, yesterday we have discussed about the factors that affect the biodiversity. You learn about the overexploitation of the natural resources, invasiveness, invasions, climate change, population, pollution, habitat degradation, fragmentation. So when there is a greater risk towards the biodiversity, then the word think about the conservation of the biodiversity. So the word make first convention for the protection of the biological diversity all around the world. And up to now about 150 countries of the world are signatory of this CBD. So about 150, and Pakistan is also one of the signatory partner of this CBD. India is also partner. China is also partner. Number of the countries, they are signatory to this CBD. CBD, the major objective, the major goal of the CBD is basically they set the targets for next 10 years. They set the target for next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, that after 30 years where we will stand, how we protect the biodiversity, how we protect the biological diversity all around the world. So this basically convention is conducting or arranging conferences, seminars, and they provide the funds. And this CBD is work under the UN, that is the United Nations. And United Nations every year they set the goals for the next 5 years or 10 years, that the different countries are given the targets, how they protect their biodiversity, how they reduce the production of CO2 to the atmosphere, how they control the pollution, how they protect the environment. So the major objective of this CBD is basically to protect the biological diversity around the world, globally, regionally, and locally. So this is commonly we use this term, that is the CBD. Are you clear about the CBD?
Yes, sir.
In last meeting of CBD, they, in Japan, they set a target of COP15, COPE 15. It's a common term, we commonly use this. All are the capital word COP 15. That is the stands for the conference of the parties. All the partners, all the parties who did a sign for the conservation of biological diversity under COP 15, they set a target that we will develop the SDGs of every country, of every region. SDGs. SDGs stand for Sustainable Development Goals. So this is the common term we will use in our upcoming lectures. SDGs under Core 15. Under Core 15, SDGs mean to set the Sustainable Development Goals that everybody, every country, every region who get the benefits from the biodiversity, they must protect this biodiversity with respect to the sustainability. Yesterday I gave you the example of Prunus africana and Kenya, that the government order the people that if they cut one tree, they cultivate 10 trees. So this is called as Sustainable Development Goals. How to achieve your SDGs, how you reduce the CO2 in your atmosphere and improve your oxygen and protect your wetlands, biodiversity, lakes, mountains, to protect the culture as well. So all SDGs includes cultural as well as biological diversity conservation. So you protect the culture, to protect the, for example, some people who are working about the ethnobotanical diversity of the plants, animals, ethnobiology, that is called as ethnobiology. Some people document the knowledge of the local community, so that come under this SDGs. How they protect the knowledge of the local community that is related to their native biodiversity. So this is another term that is SDG. Another term that is used during this course is mdGs. What is mdGs? Anybody know about the mdGs? mdGs, targets, goals. Some students from environmental science or ecology. You know what is mdGs? This stands for the Millennium Development Goals. Millennium Development Goals. Millennium Development Goals means they set the targets about the clean mechanisms. Clean mechanism means to reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere, to reduce the pollutants in the soil, water, atmosphere, to make your geography, your area, you make your regions clean. This is called as Millennium Development Goals. And under this, Core 15 is mainly confined to the SDGs, that is a sustainable development, and mdGs, that is confined to the Clean Development Mechanism, CDM. You know about the CDM? What is CDM? You know about the carbon credits. What is the carbon credits? CDM. CDM stands for the Clean Development Mechanism. This is the common term that we use during our lectures about biodiversity when we are talking about the environmental protection, environmental conservation. So CDM is basically we will use for the Clean Development Mechanism, and Clean Development Mechanism is directly linked to reduce your CO2 in the atmosphere. You earn the credit, CO2 credits. So every country, if they reduce CO2, they get a money, they get a financial assistance from UNDP, UN, and number of other developed or advanced countries, because most of the advanced countries, they are producing more CO2 than your countries like Pakistan, India, and our underdeveloped countries are developing world. So they give a money to your countries to reduce CO2, because when you have to reduce CO2, then you are working about CDM, that is called as Clean Development Mechanism. So you earn the carbon credits. In last government, they ban about the use of the plastic bag. You learn about the news, plastic bags, polythene bags, because they are the casual agent for the soil pollution, they are the casual agent for the death and decaying of the marine water, marine life, aquatic life, water ecosystem. They are basically, so they ban basically to make this CDM. But Core 15 is now make the target for the SDGs, that you use the biodiversity with sustainable manner for your upcoming generation or your future. So these are the different basically targets that are set by the CBD, that is called as Convention on Biological Diversity. You clear all these things?
Yes, sir.
Then we use common terms that is called as invasion. Invasion, invasiveness, invasive species. So this is also another important term, invasion, invasiveness, and invasive species. Invasive species. So these are the terms that are linked to each other. Invasion, that is the spread of invasive species in ecosystem or in region, that is called as invasion. When they invade the native species, when they invade the indigenous species, when they replace the indigenous species and they spread everywhere, this process is called as invasion. Invasion is basically a process where the exotic or invasive species spread with fast track and they replace the native species, they replace the indigenous species, they replace the endemic species and they become dominant. This is called as invasion, and invasion has a harmful impact on biodiversity. So this is one of the important threats towards, one of the important factors that threaten the biodiversity of your own region or local region. So this is called as invasion, and invasion behavior is called as invasiveness. Invasion behavior is called as invasiveness. So this is called as invasiveness, and invasive species are those species which are not native to your region. They are outside the region, and I already told about that. Invasive species are those species, they produce large quantity of the seed, large quantity of the pollen, more viable, more aggressive behavior, that dispersion mechanism is very strong, and they favorable conditions. They also exist in unfavorable conditions. They also exist in the fragmented soil, habitat destruction, where there is a disturbance, invasive species, they adopt that habitat. So they have a great ecological amplitude. So this term is basically invasiveness, or invasive species are those species which are not native to your region. They have exotic regions and they have a aggressive behavior to replace the indigenous species because of ecological amplitude. Because of ecological amplitude. What is this? What is ecological amplitude? Anybody know about the ecological amplitude?
Ecological difference.
What is ecological amplitude? You are, I think, a student of MPhil and PhD and ecology, biodiversity. Yes.
टेक्नोलॉजिकल एम्पलीट्यूड में कि कोई प्लांट जो है मतलब ज़्यादा एरिया में अगर ग्रो कर सकते हैं तो हम कह सकते हैं कि इसका ecological amplitude बहुत ज़्यादा
This is a, yes, it's a good concept. Basically, range होती है. It's a range of ecological factors. Some species, they have a wider ecological amplitude, some species have a narrow ecological amplitude, and some species have a cosmopolitan, that's a worldwide ecological amplitude. That is a range of environmental conditions where these species exist, range of environmental conditions or ecological factors where the species adopted, where the species exist, where the species live, that is called as ecological amplitude. For example, one of the grass that is called as Cynodon dactylon, that is the grass which belong to family Poaceae, that have a wider ecological amplitude. Cynodon exists in the deserts, Cynodon exists in your plain areas, Cynodon exists in the moist ecosystem, that exists in the sedges at the level of timberline, you know that. Everywhere you see the Cynodon dactylon. So we call it Cynodon as a wider ecological amplitude. So it is a range of environmental conditions for. So invasion, you clear about this? Invasiveness, invasive species. Another term we use that is called as exotic. Exotic is any species, either plants, either insects, birds and mammals or plants, which have a origin than native. Not a native origin, they are introduced from outside. If the species introduced from South Africa to your region, that is called as exotic. If the species introduced from China to your region, that is called as exotic. If your species, they are introduced to Europe, they are exotic to the Europe. So the exotic species are those species which have outside the origin. They are not native to your ecosystem, not native to your habitat. So this is called as exotic. And parallel to this, another term that is called as native. Natives are those species, those biodiversity, those variety of the lives which are indigenous to your culture, indigenous to your region, indigenous to their local habitat. They are called as native. If you have a native species, for example, taxus, for example, Juniperus excelsa, so many other species of plants. Indus Nile dolphin is also native to this Indus river, so this is called as native species. And also we use another term that is called as endemic. Endemic or endemism. Endemism. Endemics are those species which have a narrow ecological amplitude. They have not a wider ecological amplitude. They have a narrow ecological amplitude, and they are restricted to the particular habitat. They are restricted to their particular habitat. Their habit is also narrow because the life form is very specific. They are adapted to specific environment. They are adapted to restricted geography. They are not found elsewhere. That is called as endemic. Endemics are basically native. Endemic are basically native species with restricted geography, with restricted ecological amplitude, and they are specific to their specific habitat. So this is called as endemic species. Please let me know some example of endemic species of astragalus.
Sir, Astragalus vatensis,
Yes.
Astragalus parkiri, only found in Chhatras.
Chitras, they are not found in Punjab, not found in Kashmir, so they are restricted to the chitras.
Astragalus Velas Astori, Astorvelin, Astragalus Kashmirianus.
Yes. So these are the few examples of Astragalus kashmiriensis, Astragalus vaquerii, or it's just like Barbarus balochistan that is endemic to Balochistan. And similarly, anemone, Mir ajibai, that is restricted to the northern area. So there are a number of there are a number of the species that are restricted to our geography, only found in this region with particular habitat. That they are called as endemic to this region. For example, some species are endemic to Himalaya, so they are called as endemic species of Himalaya. If they are endemic to the tropical rainforest, so they are called as endemic to tropical rainforest. So endemic species are the native species with restricted geography, and they are specific to their specific habitat. That is called as endemic. And this phenomena and this process where the endemic species exist and they hybridize, they produce their fertile offspring, that is called as endemism. This is called as endemism. Endemism is basically the process where the endemic species can interbreed and produce their offsprings, and they hybridize with each other. They are perform different specific functions within their only restricted habitat. That is called as endemism. So endemic, endemism, these are the common terms we will use this. Another term that is called as naturalized. You know about naturalized? What is naturalized? Naturalized species diversity. Anybody know about naturalized? Yes.
Those species जो introduced to
Yes. Some species they are introduced to any regions or particular habitat in your control condition, either in your botanical garden, in your farmland, in your museum, in your zoo. But after a few years, they escape from your control condition and become wild. They have a wild distribution. Then after a few years or many years. So this is called as naturalized. For example, Lantana camara was introduced in Europe as an ornamental plant. That is, it is cultivated in the lawn, it is cultivated along the roadside. But after this, its pollen, its seed, they disperse and become naturalized. This is called as naturalized species. Parthenia was also in control condition, but it is now uncontrolled. If naturalized species have an invasive behavior, it is produced in aggressive way, it replaces the native species, then we call it naturalized species might be invasive. Yes. For example, Lantana is naturalized, now it is invasive. Parthenia was naturalized, now it is invasive. Bullfrog in US, that was introduced as a naturalized frog for the other insects, but now the bullfrog is a naturalized invasive species in US. So there are a number of the species that exist. Australian perchfish is a naturalized, but now it is an invasive species in Australia that eating the indigenous fishes as well. So yes, naturalized species might be invasive. Native species invasive. Yeah, this is a good question. And native species, they are basically adapted to the local regions, and they are living in a friendly environment like intra-species or you know about the intra and inter-species competition means sometimes native species demand increases either for the water, food, and then they might be replaced to the local species. They are not, we use the word allelopathic species. We use the word for native species. If we become allelopathic of native species, that is called, because if they replace a local flora in their surrounding, this is called as allelopathic species sometimes.
Sir, which character makes the species to become naturalized?
Basically, naturalized is basically consists of two important areas. seed viability or germination rate is high, and the pollen dispersal mechanism. If their pollen, they are dispersed along the meals, along the road, from Afghanistan to Pakistan, from Pakistan to India. If their pollen fertility is above 90%, if their seed viability is above 80%, then they become naturalized.
This character is not present in every plant.
Yes. Clear? And you clear about the two characters, that is the viability and the fertility of the molecule. And sometimes the naturalized species have a successful mechanism for pollination as well. Pollination means transfer of their pollen grain within the species and surrounding, or pollination is again then divided into many types: zoochory, entomophily, anemophily, number of terms that we have to use, but these are the common terms that you learn about ecological dispersal mechanisms. So naturalized, and another one species called as escape species. Escape species are basically the term that is used for the naturalized. Escape species is a term that is a parallel term that is used for the naturalized. When the naturalized, they escape from your control to the wild, that is called as escape species. So we have to use another term, that is escape species.
Naturalized and introduced.
No, introduced are basically those species which are introduced either for purpose, either they are introduced for ornamental purpose, either they are introduced to the region for trade. For example, black pepper is introduced in our South Asia for trade. Cinchona bark was introduced in Europe from Africa for the treatment of the malaria. Artemisia is introduced in different parts of Africa and Europe for the malarial treatment. So introduced is a term that is linked to the trade, linked to the economics. Yes, when they introduce into a region and then they become naturalized and become escape, then it is decided. So all these terms are basically linked to each other. It depends upon their dispersal, their mechanism, their distributions. Domesticate is a common term that is used for cultivation. If you kept up indigenous cat to your own, that is called domestication. If you get up gene or seeds from different medicinal plants, for example, Anthemus, that is Gulababuna, Anthemus, that is Anthemus nobilis, I think. That is basically the wild species that is in Chitral and other areas, but it is domesticated in Karshi garden, domesticated in Amdar garden, domesticated in our homes for herbal. So these are known as domestications. Domestication is basically the term that is linked to the cultivation, domestication. For example, cat, आप तो पाकिस्तान में लोग चीते भी घर में रखते हैं, they are domesticated. Yes. Cultivar is basically the term that is anything, any variety, any farmer that is under cultivation. Cultivar is any farm, lower rank होता है of any species. Either it is a variety, either it is a farm, either it is a just to say about the wheat 94, wheat Chakwal, wheat Burewala. So these are the basic cultivar under cultivation. Anything under cultivation is called as cultivar. Clear? So I think these are common terms we will use in our upcoming lecture, inshallah. So yes, it's excellent. Another important that is exotic species. Exotic species are those species which have a origin outside the native region. So when they harm the local flora, exotic species, when they harm the local flora and fauna, and then they disturb the ecosystem, native ecosystem, they are called as aliens. They are called as aliens. Alien is basically a term that is restricted to the harmfulness. Huh? Yes. Any harm, either they replace, either they destroy, either they cause disease, that is called as alien species. Alien are mostly exotic. But when the native species or local species become alien to the other species, that is called as allelopathic species. Some theories in 2021, I think one of the evolutionary theories that is presented by one of the scientists from Europe, Mary, I don't know exact name, she concluded that the human being is an alien species on the earth planet.
Yes.
That was introduced from Jannah according to Quran and Hadith and our Islamic literature, that the Homo sapien was introduced from Jannah to this earth planet. So human being is an alien species. So he rejected all those theories that was given by the Darwin. That